This is my ranking of the best PS5 games I've played. No reviews, no hype, just my real experience. From absolute masterpieces to games that didn't hit at all, everything is placed based on how fun, polished, and memorable it actually felt. Let's get straight into it. Black Myth Wukong immediately caught my attention with its fast and responsive combat. Every encounter asks me to stay focused, watch enemy patterns, and react at the right moment, especially during the many boss fights. Those bosses are easily the highlight for me, since each one feels unique and pushes me to improve my timing and strategy. I also really like how the world draws inspiration from Chinese mythology, which gives the setting a distinct identity that stands apart from many other action adventures. The environments look beautiful, and the animation work adds a lot of life to every battle and location. At the same time, I did run into a few technical problems like bugs and crashes, which can interrupt the flow. Even with those issues, the combat and boss design leave a strong impact. In my tier list, this one goes into the excellent tier. Riders Republic gives me a huge playground filled with extreme sports and chaotic downhill events. Instead of sticking to a single activity, I can switch between biking, snowboarding, skiing, and wingsuit racing while moving across mountains, forests, and massive slopes. Each sport feels different to control, so I have to adjust my timing, manage my speed, and plan tricks depending on the terrain. The open map is packed with races, stunt challenges, collectibles, and hidden activities, which kept me exploring and jumping into new events for a long time. Multiplayer adds even more energy, especially the massive races where dozens of players rush downhill together, creating wild and unpredictable moments. I did experience some crashes and technical hiccups during my time with it, which can interrupt the flow occasionally. Even so, the variety and large open world keep things engaging throughout. This one fits nicely into the good tier for me. Resident Evil 4 Remake delivers an intense action horror experience that constantly keeps me on edge from beginning to end. The combat feels smooth and responsive, letting me move freely while aiming, dodging attacks, and reacting quickly to enemies closing in from every direction. Fights are tense since enemies rarely give me space, forcing me to think fast and manage my resources carefully. I also like how the campaign keeps introducing new enemy types and situations, which stops the gameplay from feeling repetitive. The environments look fantastic, and the sound design builds a strong sense of tension as I move through villages, castles, and dark laboratories. Small improvements to movement, inventory, and combat mechanics make the entire adventure feel modern while still respecting what made the original so special. For me, this easily earns a spot in the masterpiece tier. Tekken 8 presents a fighting experience that feels powerful, fast, and highly polished. The core combat still focuses on spacing, timing, and reading your opponent, but the new heat system pushes matches toward a more aggressive style. I like how this mechanic encourages constant pressure, letting fighters deal extra chip damage and extend combos while also recovering some health through offense. Each character continues to feel unique, and learning their moves, strengths, and counters adds real depth to every fight. The roster includes strong returning fighters along with some interesting newcomers that introduce fresh playstyles. Training tools are also excellent, giving me detailed ways to study moves, practice different situations, and review my own matches. Combined with solid single-player content and improved online play, the overall package feels extremely refined. This entry lands in the masterpiece tier. Star Wars Jedi Survivor builds on the foundation of Fallen Order and expands it in many meaningful ways. Right from the start, I have access to many of Cal's abilities, which keeps the action moving and avoids repeating the same progression from the first game. Combat feels deeper with multiple lightsaber stances that change how I approach each fight, whether I want speed, power, or a mix of ranged attacks. The story focuses more on Cal's personal struggles and the people around him, which adds emotional weight to the journey. Some performance issues and bugs appear occasionally, but the overall adventure remains strong. This one earns a place in the excellent tier. Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3 ended up being a disappointing experience for me, especially when looking at its single-player campaign. Instead of delivering the cinematic missions the series is known for, many levels feel shallow and repetitive. The new open combat missions try to give more freedom, but they often feel empty and poorly structured rather than exciting. I also noticed that the story struggles to create memorable moments, with characters and plot developments that feel rushed and underwritten. Several missions rely heavily on recycled ideas and locations, which makes the whole campaign feel strangely familiar in a bad way. The gunplay still feels smooth and polished, and the visuals and sound design remain high quality. Even with those strengths, the campaign lacks excitement and meaningful progression. On this ranking, it unfortunately drops straight into the trash tier. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth expands everything that Remake introduced and turns the adventure into something far larger in scale. Exploring the world feels incredible, with huge regions filled with towns, side activities, and beautiful environments that bring this classic setting to life in a new way. Combat blends real-time action with tactical abilities, and switching between party members adds a lot of depth to every battle. There are times when the plot becomes a bit complicated with its new timeline ideas, but the scale, characters, and gameplay make the experience unforgettable. In this ranking, it rises all the way into the masterpiece tier. Forza Horizon 5 creates an incredible open-world racing experience that constantly keeps me exploring and driving across its huge version of Mexico. The map feels massive and varied, with deserts, jungles, cities, beaches, and even a towering volcano that offers some of the best roads for racing and drifting. Driving always feels smooth and responsive, and the huge garage of cars gives me endless options to experiment with different builds and styles. I also like how the game rewards progress through races, stunts, and challenges without forcing a strict path forward. The visuals are stunning, especially the lighting, weather, and particle effects like dust and smoke during high-speed races. Online events and custom races add even more variety, making the world feel active and constantly changing. In this ranking, it speeds straight into the masterpiece tier. God of War Ragnarök continues Kratos and Atreus' journey with a story that feels grand, emotional, and packed with powerful moments. The narrative dives deeper into themes of destiny, family, and the consequences of past actions, giving nearly every character meaningful time to shine. Combat remains brutal and satisfying, with the Leviathan axe and Blades of Chaos offering a mix of heavy strikes, elemental abilities, and fast-paced attacks that keep every fight exciting. The variety of enemies and boss battles also feels much greater, which keeps the action fresh throughout the adventure. Exploring the different realms reveals beautiful environments, hidden challenges, and side quests that expand the world even further. With strong performances, incredible presentation, and thrilling gameplay from beginning to end, this epic journey climbs straight into the masterpiece tier. Street Fighter VI brings the series back with an incredibly polished and feature-packed fighting experience. The new drive system adds a lot of strategy to every match, giving me several powerful options that can be used right from the start of each round. Managing that meter becomes a key part of the fight, whether I want to pressure my opponent, extend combos, or defend against incoming attacks. The roster feels strong as well, mixing classic fighters with interesting newcomers that each bring their own style into the arena. I also appreciate how the game offers deep training tools and helpful tutorials that make learning characters and mechanics much easier. Online play runs smoothly, and the Battle Hub adds a lively social space for matches and events. With its depth, style, and huge amount of content, this entry punches straight into the masterpiece tier. Horizon Forbidden West takes Aloy's journey further with a larger world, deeper combat, and a story that expands the conflict between humanity and the machines. Exploring the Forbidden West is a highlight for me, with deserts, jungles, ruined cities, and coastal areas that all look stunning and feel full of life. Fighting the machines remains the heart of the experience, and learning their weak points, removing their weapons, and using different elemental attacks keeps every battle engaging. I also appreciate how side quests and settlements feel much more meaningful this time, often telling smaller stories that connect to the world around Aloy. The characters and performances add a lot of personality throughout the adventure as well. While some familiar open-world habits and limited climbing freedom hold it back slightly, this adventure still secures a spot in the excellent tier. Doom: The Dark Ages takes the series in a slightly different direction, while still keeping the intense action that Doom is known for. The combat feels heavier this time, with the new shield adding both defensive and offensive options that change how battles play out. I like how it encourages pushing forward into the chaos instead of constantly jumping around the battlefield. The arsenal grows throughout the campaign, giving plenty of creative ways to take down the massive waves of demons that appear on screen. Levels are also larger and more open, filled with secrets, upgrade materials, and challenging encounters that reward exploration. The heavy metal soundtrack and brutal weapon design keep the energy high during every fight. Some side mechanics like the dragon and mech sections feel simpler than the main combat, but the core action still places this one in the excellent tier. Hogwarts Legacy finally brings the fantasy of living as a student at Hogwarts to life in a full open-world adventure. Walking through the castle halls, discovering secret rooms, flying across the countryside on a broom, and visiting places like Hogsmeade creates a strong sense of immersion that kept me exploring for hours. Spellcasting combat is surprisingly deep, letting me combine different spells to pull enemies closer, launch them into the air, or blast them away with explosive magic. I also enjoyed spending time with classmates and completing side quests that make the school feel alive. There are technical issues and the enemy variety becomes repetitive over time, but the experience still captures the magic of the wizarding world in many memorable ways. On this tier list, it lands in the great tier. EA Sports FC 26 makes several small improvements on the pitch that make matches feel smoother than before. Dribbling feels more responsive, passing is sharper, and goalkeepers position themselves better, which helps create more balanced matches. I also like the new gameplay presets that separate competitive online play from a more realistic offline style, giving different modes their own feel. Some updates to Career Mode, Ultimate Team, and Clubs add useful features and new challenges that keep things interesting. However, the heavy focus on monetization drags the experience down quite a bit. The Season Pass locks certain rewards and even classic players behind progression that often pushes players towards spending money. Even with the gameplay improvements, that aggressive approach holds it back, placing this one in the mediocre tier. Marvel's Spider-Man 2 lets me play as both Peter Parker and Miles Morales, each bringing their own abilities and style of fighting. Swinging through New York still feels fantastic, and the new web wings make traveling across the city even faster and more exciting. Combat remains fast and satisfying, especially with new powers like Miles' electric attacks and Peter's aggressive symbiote abilities that add more impact to fights. The story is also a highlight, exploring deeper emotional themes while bringing in major villains like Kraven and Venom. Boss battles feel more intense this time, and the increased enemy variety keeps encounters engaging. The open world is larger, but many side activities still feel repetitive and follow a familiar formula. Even with that drawback, this adventure earns its place in the excellent tier. Dead Space Remake brings the terrifying journey aboard the USG Ishimura back with stunning visuals and improved design while keeping the intense survival horror that made the original so memorable. The atmosphere is incredible, with dark corridors, eerie lighting, and unsettling sounds that constantly make me feel like something is lurking around the next corner. Combat still focuses on strategically dismembering necromorphs, which makes every encounter tense and forces me to aim carefully instead of just shooting wildly. I also appreciate the added story details and Isaac's voice dialogue, which give more depth to the characters and events. With its refined gameplay, terrifying atmosphere, and thoughtful improvements, this horror revival rises into the masterpiece tier. Rise of the Ronin takes place in 19th century Japan during a time of major political change, letting me explore a historical setting while taking part in intense sword fights. The combat is easily the strongest part, with deep mechanics that reward precise timing, smart weapon choices, and mastering techniques like counters and parries. I also like the variety of weapons and fighting styles, which allow different approaches during battles. Story missions and co-op moments can be exciting, especially when teaming up with allies to defeat tough enemies. However, the open world often feels overloaded with icons, side tasks, and a massive amount of loot that becomes tedious to manage. Those systems sometimes distract from the excellent combat underneath. Even with that clutter, the strong action and setting still place this one in the good tier. Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart is one of those PS5 games that instantly shows what the console can do. The visuals look incredible, with colorful worlds, detailed characters, and near-instant transitions between locations that feel seamless. I really like how the adventure mixes fast third-person shooting with platforming while constantly giving me new weapons to experiment with. Many of these weapons are creative and fun to use, turning chaotic battles into something exciting every time enemies appear. The story also adds heart through Ratchet, Clank, and the introduction of Rivet, who quickly becomes a memorable character. Movement feels smooth, combat is satisfying, and the entire journey stays engaging from start to finish. With its creativity, presentation, and pure fun factor, this one earns a spot in the masterpiece tier of my list. Assassin's Creed Mirage shifts the focus back towards stealth-driven gameplay, which feels refreshing after the massive RPG-style entries. Instead of relying on levels and heavy combat systems, success comes from careful movement, observing patrol routes, and planning precise assassinations. Baghdad is a lively setting filled with crowded markets, rooftops, and narrow streets that create plenty of opportunities to hide, blend in, and move quietly between targets. I enjoyed using tools like throwing knives, smoke bombs, and distractions to create openings without getting into open fights. Combat still exists, but it's clearly meant to be a last resort, encouraging a more thoughtful approach. The story centered on Basim is fairly simple, and the characters don't leave a huge impression, yet the focused pacing keeps the adventure moving well. With its stealth-heavy design and tighter scope, this lands in the good tier of my ranking. Helldivers 2 is a chaotic co-op shooter that constantly creates unpredictable and hilarious moments during missions. Every drop onto a planet feels tense as my squad scrambles to complete objectives while waves of alien bugs or deadly robots close in from every direction. I like how teamwork plays such a huge role, since calling in airstrikes, turrets, or reinforcements requires coordination and quick thinking while everything is falling apart around you. The variety of weapons, stratagem abilities, and enemy types keeps missions exciting even after many hours. Friendly fire also adds a layer of chaos that often leads to some unforgettable moments with friends. Playing solo can be tough, but with a good squad, the experience becomes incredibly fun and intense. With its addictive co-op gameplay and constant action, this earns the excellent tier in my ranking. Final Fantasy XVI is a huge story-driven adventure that kept me invested for dozens of hours. The world of Valisthea feels rich with political conflict, powerful kingdoms, and memorable characters, especially Clive, whose journey carries the entire narrative. I really like how the story unfolds across different stages of his life while introducing allies like Jill and Cid who add emotional depth to the experience. Combat leans heavily into fast-paced action, letting me chain abilities, dodge attacks, and unleash powerful icon skills during intense battles. The icon encounters themselves are some of the most spectacular moments in the entire game, feeling like massive cinematic clashes. While some RPG mechanics feel lighter than expected and regular enemies repeat often, the storytelling, music, characters, and huge boss fights keep the adventure exciting throughout. In my ranking, this lands in the excellent tier. Ghost of Tsushima Director's Cut is an incredible samurai adventure that blends storytelling, exploration, and combat into a truly memorable experience. Playing as Jin Sakai, the story follows his struggle between honor and survival as he fights to defend Tsushima during the Mongol invasion. The open world is stunning, filled with golden fields, forests, and quiet villages that make exploration feel peaceful yet meaningful. Combat is smooth and technique-focused, using different stances, precise parries, and fast sword strikes that make every duel feel intense. I also like how the game guides exploration naturally through the wind and environment instead of relying heavily on traditional map markers. With the Iki Island expansion and additional improvements included, this version feels like the complete package. For this list, it belongs in the Masterpiece tier. Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 gives me the familiar multiplayer experience I expect from the series, while adding a few improvements that keep things interesting. The gunplay feels tight and responsive, and I like how each weapon has its own weight and handling. The weapon customization system is deep, letting me experiment with attachments and tune my loadouts to match my playstyle. Large modes like Ground War and Invasion create massive battles across big maps, which makes matches feel chaotic in a fun way. At the same time, the classic modes are still great when I want quick and focused action. I did run into some technical problems and performance drops, which can be frustrating during matches. Even with those issues, the multiplayer remains engaging and fun to play. In my tier list, Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 sits in the good tier. Clair Obscur Expedition 33 presents a beautiful world and an emotional story built around a haunting idea. In this world, a mysterious figure known as the Paintress decides the age at which people disappear, and every year an expedition sets out hoping to stop her. That premise creates a strong sense of urgency and makes the journey feel meaningful. I really enjoy how the turn-based combat mixes classic strategy with real-time actions like dodging and parrying, which keeps every battle exciting. Each party member has unique mechanics, so experimenting with different abilities and combinations becomes a big part of the gameplay. The story moves at a steady pace without unnecessary filler, while optional locations still reward exploration. Strong voice acting and an excellent soundtrack add even more emotion. This one easily earns a place in the excellent tier. Crash Bandicoot 4, It's About Time, feels like a true continuation of the classic trilogy, while adding fresh ideas that make the experience feel modern. I like how the platforming keeps the tight controls and challenging level design the series is known for, but introduces new mechanics like the quantum masks that change gravity, slow time, and create clever puzzles. The levels are creative and often quite tough, pushing me to carefully time jumps, spins, and dashes. Playing as different characters such as Tawna, Dingodile, and Cortex also adds variety since each one has unique abilities and level designs. The colorful worlds, lively animations, and playful soundtrack give the game a lot of personality. It can be brutally challenging at times, but finishing difficult sections feels incredibly satisfying. This one lands in the great tier. Resident Evil Village continues Ethan Winter's story with a mix of horror, action, and exploration. The setting in a mysterious European village creates a dark atmosphere filled with strange monsters and memorable villains. I like how each area has its own style, from the towering castle to creepy houses and industrial factories, which keeps the adventure feeling fresh. The combat is more action-focused compared to Resident Evil 7, giving me more weapons and upgrades, while still maintaining tension when resources are limited. Exploring the village hub and returning to previously locked paths adds a rewarding sense of discovery. The Duke Merchant system also encourages searching every corner for treasures and upgrades. Some boss fights feel a bit simple, but the variety of enemies keeps encounters interesting. It easily earns a place in the excellent tier. The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt is one of the most memorable open-world RPGs I have played. The world feels massive and alive, filled with villages, forests, monsters, and people trying to survive in a war-torn land. I spend a lot of time exploring because there is always something interesting to discover, whether it is a monster contract, a hidden story, or a meaningful side quest. Many side missions feel just as detailed as the main story, which makes the world feel deeper and more believable. Combat combines swordplay, magic signs, potions, and preparation, giving me several ways to approach each fight. I also like how my choices affect characters and events later in the adventure, making decisions feel important. Strong writing, memorable characters, and a huge world full of stories place this game in the masterpiece tier. Marvel's Spider-Man Miles Morales' focuses on Miles stepping into his role as a new hero while protecting his neighborhood. Swinging across snowy New York feels smooth and exciting, and the winter setting gives the city a fresh look compared to the previous adventure. I enjoy how Miles plays differently from Peter, especially with his bioelectric venom powers and camouflage ability, which add variety to combat and stealth. The story spends more time in Harlem, showing Miles balancing his life as a teenager with the responsibility of being Spider-Man. That personal focus helps the characters and community feel important. Side activities are also improved, with fewer repetitive tasks and more meaningful missions around the city. The adventure is shorter than the previous game, but it remains polished and engaging from beginning to end. It earns a place in the great tier. Warhammer 40,000 Space Marine 2 throws me straight into massive battles where I step into the armored boots of Dimitri and Titus once again. The campaign sends my squad across several war-torn planets, fighting swarms of Tyranids that range from small rushing creatures to towering monsters. Combat mixes heavy gunfire with brutal melee strikes, and using weapons like bolt rifles, flamethrowers, and chainswords feels powerful in every encounter. I also like how executions restore shields, pushing me to stay aggressive instead of hiding behind cover. Movement carries a satisfying weight, yet the character remains quick enough to handle chaotic fights. The environments look impressive as well, from alien landscapes to massive Gothic cities filled with soldiers battling in the background. Extra modes and customization add more to explore beyond the campaign. It secures a strong spot in the excellent tier. Silent Hill 2 places me in the role of James Sunderland, a man drawn to the fog-covered town after receiving a mysterious letter from his deceased wife. The story explores guilt, grief, and personal trauma in a way that few horror games attempt. As I move through the quiet streets and decaying buildings, the town gradually reflects James's troubled mind. Sound design keeps the tension constant, with the radio crackling whenever something dangerous lurks nearby. Darkness and narrow spaces create a heavy sense of dread, making exploration feel stressful in the best possible way. The puzzles are thoughtful and often require careful observation of the environment. Combat feels improved compared to the original, with smoother controls and clearer weapon switching. Strong voice acting and haunting music strengthen the emotional impact of the journey. It belongs in the masterpiece tier. Armored Core 5 Fires of Rubicon centers on piloting a customizable combat mech across the war-torn planet Rubicon, where multiple factions battle for control of a powerful resource. The campaign unfolds through a wide range of missions, from destroying enemy facilities to surviving intense boss encounters that test different combat strategies. The strongest element is the deep customization system that allows the mech to be built with various weapons, body parts, and mobility options. Experimenting with lightweight, agile builds or heavy machines packed with destructive firepower becomes a big part of the experience. Combat moves quickly, with constant boosting, missile volleys, and close-range attacks creating exciting battles. Many missions feel like tactical challenges where adjusting the loadout becomes part of solving the fight. The story mostly unfolds through radio chatter and briefings, which feels simple, but the combat and mech design systems remain consistently engaging. It lands in the excellent tier. The Last of Us Part 1 follows Joel and Ellie as they travel across a ruined United States after a devastating outbreak changes the world forever. The journey explores survival, loss, and the complicated bond that grows between the two characters while they face infected creatures and dangerous human factions. This remake rebuilds the environments and character models with impressive detail, making abandoned cities, forests, and quiet interiors feel far more alive. Subtle facial expressions and improved animations add extra weight to many emotional scenes. Gameplay mixes stealth, limited resources, and tense combat where every encounter can quickly become dangerous. Enemy AI behaves more intelligently, often searching areas in groups and trying to surround the player. The included Left Behind chapter expands Ellie's story and adds meaningful context to the adventure. With its unforgettable narrative and refined presentation, it belongs in the masterpiece tier. Devil May Cry 5 focuses on stylish, fast-paced action where every fight rewards creativity and precise timing. The story follows Nero, Dante, and the mysterious V as they face a powerful demon threat spreading through the city. Each character brings a very different approach to combat, which keeps the gameplay constantly changing. Nero fights with his mechanical Devil Breaker arms that introduce new abilities and flashy attacks, while Dante uses a large arsenal of weapons and combat styles that can switch during combos. V takes a completely different role by summoning creatures to attack enemies while he finishes them with a cane strike. The combat system encourages experimentation, allowing long combos and creative moves to raise style rankings during battles. Boss fights are intense and visually spectacular, testing reflexes and mastery of each character's abilities. It belongs in the masterpiece tier. Where Winds Meet presents a large, wuxia-inspired world filled with martial arts masters, political intrigue, and supernatural techniques. The setting captures the spirit of classic wuxia stories, with characters capable of running across rooftops, leaping through forests, and wielding mystical abilities during combat. Battles rely on weapon styles, parries, and ability chains that create a slower but tactical rhythm compared to many action RPGs. Exploring the world can be entertaining at times, especially when discovering unusual activities like learning special techniques or encountering strange events in the wilderness. However, the experience often becomes weighed down by complicated progression systems, heavy micromanagement, and technical issues that interrupt the flow of the adventure. Story moments and side quests vary widely in quality, with some memorable highlights mixed among weaker sections. Despite its ambition and strong atmosphere, the uneven execution places it in the good tier. Ninja Gaiden 4 brings back the series' intense action with extremely fast and demanding combat. The story follows Yakumo, a new ninja tasked with escorting a priestess and stopping the Dark Dragon's return, though the plot and characters remain fairly simple. What truly carries the experience is the combat system, where enemies attack relentlessly and force constant movement, parrying, and quick decision-making. Techniques like Flying Swallow, Izuna Drop, and powerful ultimate attacks return, allowing fights to feel brutal and stylish at the same time. Yakumo's Bloodraven form adds another layer by letting certain attacks break enemy defenses and create openings during chaotic battles. Weapon swapping also allows creative combos that keep encounters fresh throughout the campaign. While the story and level design feel weaker than the combat, the thrilling action easily keeps the experience engaging. It lands in the excellent tier. Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War brings the familiar mix of campaign, multiplayer, and zombies, but the experience feels uneven across those modes. The campaign is the highlight, offering a cinematic spy thriller set during the Cold War with missions that mix stealth, gunfights, and player choices. Some levels allow multiple approaches, which makes the story feel more interactive than many other entries. The action is explosive and fast, with satisfying gunplay that keeps the missions exciting from start to finish. Multiplayer, however, feels less polished compared to other entries, with limited maps and gameplay that doesn't feel as smooth as some previous titles. Taking everything together, this one lands in the good tier. Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade revisits the classic story with modern visuals, deeper character moments, and a much more dynamic combat system. The journey through Midgar expands on the original narrative, giving more time to characters like Jesse, Biggs, and Wedge, while building stronger connections between the main cast. Battles mix real-time action with strategic command choices, allowing attacks, abilities, and materia skills to be combined in creative ways during intense encounters. The world feels far more detailed this time. Even with some pacing issues and side activities, the strong storytelling and engaging combat place this entry in the excellent tier. Metal Gear Solid Delta Snake Eater brings the legendary stealth action story into the modern era with a major visual overhaul while keeping the original design almost completely intact. The Cold War spy narrative of Naked Snake remains the same. Sneaking through dense jungles still feels like solving a puzzle, where camouflage, patience, and clever distractions help slip past guards or silently take them down. Systems like camouflage management, survival mechanics, and close-quarters combat add layers of strategy that keep every encounter tense. The upgraded visuals give the environments and cinematic scenes far more detail while maintaining the tone that fans remember. Even years later, the emotional weight of Snake's mission and his connection with the boss still lands with powerful impact. That lasting brilliance places it in the masterpiece tier. Elden Ring places me in the mysterious lands between with very little guidance, and that sense of freedom becomes the heart of the entire experience. I begin as a tarnished seeking the title of Elden Lord, but most of the story unfolds through exploration, NPC encounters, and pieces of lore scattered across the world. What keeps me hooked is how curiosity is constantly rewarded. I might head toward a distant ruin and end up fighting a massive dragon, uncovering a hidden dungeon, or discovering powerful gear that changes my entire build. Combat carries the familiar weight and challenge of From Software's earlier action RPGs, with brutal enemies and unforgettable bosses that demand patience and learning. The enormous open world rarely feels repetitive, and every region hides new dangers and secrets. That incredible sense of discovery places it in the masterpiece tier. Ride 5 gives me a deep and realistic motorcycle racing experience that demands precision and focus on every lap. The handling feels responsive and balanced, but it takes time to fully understand how to manage speed, braking, and tight corners without losing control. One small mistake can cost several positions, which makes every race tense and rewarding once I start improving my skills. The career mode is packed with events, championships, and rival challenges that constantly push me to unlock better bikes and move toward the top ranks. Tracks from different parts of the world add variety, and dynamic weather can suddenly change conditions, forcing quick adjustments and strategy. Visual detail is impressive as well, with environments and lighting creating memorable moments during races. With its strong realism and satisfying progression, this racer earns a place in the great tier. Assassin's Creed Shadows takes the series to feudal Japan with two playable heroes who bring very different playstyles to the adventure. Naoe is a stealth-focused shinobi who excels at infiltration, parkour, and silent assassinations, while Yasuke is a powerful samurai built for direct combat. The story follows their efforts to dismantle a secret organization during the Sengoku period, and their contrasting personalities create some of the strongest moments in the narrative. Exploration feels more engaging this time, since the map relies less on overwhelming icons and encourages genuine discovery across the countryside. Combat has also been refined, requiring careful timing with dodges and parries instead of simple button mashing. Even with these improvements, some familiar issues remain, including predictable story beats and an imbalance between the two protagonists' playstyles. With its beautiful setting and solid gameplay changes, it lands in the good tier. Doom Eternal puts me in non-stop battles against waves of demons where speed, precision, and constant movement are the keys to survival. Every fight pushes me to stay aggressive, switching weapons quickly, using abilities, and keeping momentum so the chaos never slows down. The combat loop is incredibly satisfying, rewarding smart resource management with health, armor, and ammo gained directly from taking down enemies. New movement abilities like mid-air dashes make traversal and combat feel faster and more dynamic than before, turning arenas into high-speed playgrounds of destruction. Each encounter feels like a carefully designed challenge that tests both reflexes and strategy. The intense soundtrack, brutal weapons, and creative enemy designs combine to create a thrilling experience from start to finish. With its incredible combat design and non-stop adrenaline, it lands in the masterpiece tier. Days Gone Remastered takes me into a harsh post-apocalyptic world where survival depends on careful planning, exploration, and constant movement through dangerous territory. Riding across the wilderness on Deacon's motorcycle becomes a central part of the experience, adding tension as fuel management, repairs, and sudden encounters can quickly turn a simple trip into a risky situation. The open world feels active with roaming enemies, hostile camps, and surprise ambushes that keep every ride unpredictable. Combat blends stealth, gunplay, and quick decision-making, especially when massive hordes begin chasing across the landscape. The world design and environmental detail capture the feeling of a broken society struggling to survive. While the narrative can feel uneven and some systems take time to get comfortable with, the large-scale adventure and satisfying gameplay moments still make it a solid experience, placing it in the good tier. Dying Light the Beast brings me back to a zombie-infested world where fast movement and brutal melee combat drive every encounter. Parkour across rooftops and narrow streets remains the heart of the experience, letting me escape danger or launch surprise attacks from above. The new twist comes from Crane's monstrous abilities, which allow moments of raw power where I can tear through enemies with overwhelming strength. Boss fights against mutated infected introduce some exciting challenges. Even though many mechanics feel familiar to the series, the mix of parkour traversal, intense combat, and chaotic zombie encounters keeps the experience entertaining. That combination places it in the great tier. Astro Bot takes me on a colorful platforming adventure packed with creativity, charm, and clever level design. Each stage introduces fresh ideas and playful mechanics, from inventive power-ups to surprising environmental puzzles that keep every level feeling new. The controls are precise and responsive, making jumping, hovering, and exploring feel smooth and satisfying. Levels hide plenty of secrets and collectibles, rewarding curiosity and encouraging exploration beyond the main path. The game also celebrates PlayStation's history with fun cameos and references that longtime fans will recognize instantly. Combined with its joyful presentation, imaginative worlds, and consistently fun gameplay, it earns its place in the masterpiece tier. Death Stranding 2 on the Beach expands the strange and ambitious world of its predecessor with a more refined and engaging experience. Deliveries across vast landscapes remain the core of the gameplay, but improved combat, new tools, and expanded mechanics make each mission feel more dynamic and flexible. Planning routes, managing cargo, and adapting to environmental hazards still play a major role, while stealth encounters and intense battles add greater variety along the journey. The story dives deeper into its mysterious sci-fi themes, presenting a dense narrative filled with unusual ideas, memorable characters, and cinematic moments. Large open environments, evolving weather conditions, and new traversal options make exploration feel both challenging and rewarding. With stronger gameplay systems, a bold narrative, and a uniquely creative vision, it earns a place in the masterpiece tier. Battlefield 6 brings the series back to large-scale modern warfare, with classic modes like Conquest and Breakthrough at the center of its multiplayer experience. Massive 64-player battles, defined classes, and traditional progression systems aim to recreate the feel of earlier entries in the franchise. Gunplay can be satisfying, and the class system encourages teamwork with roles focused on combat, support, anti-vehicle tactics, and reconnaissance. The experience still feels uneven, with limited map variety and a single-player campaign that struggles with weak AI, scripting issues, and a forgettable story. While the multiplayer captures parts of what made the series popular, it rarely pushes the formula forward in meaningful ways, placing it in the mediocre tier. Hollow Knight Silksong presents a demanding and beautifully crafted adventure that builds on the strengths of its predecessor while introducing new ideas and refinements. Playing as Hornet brings a different tone and personality to the journey, with sharper movement, agile combat, and a wider range of abilities that make encounters feel fast and precise. Exploration across the world of Farloom reveals a rich network of branching paths, hidden areas, and memorable characters that reward curiosity at every turn. Challenging enemies and intense boss fights require patience, timing, and strong spatial awareness, creating battles that feel like carefully learned rhythms rather than simple reactions. The world design, music, and visual detail combine to create a striking atmosphere filled with secrets and discoveries. With its deep exploration, demanding combat, and consistently creative design, it belongs in the masterpiece tier. The first Berserker Khazan is a brutally demanding Souls-like that constantly pushes my patience and skill to the limit. The revenge story sets the stage, though the narrative itself stays fairly light while the focus shifts toward intense combat and relentless boss encounters. Khazan can wield 3 distinct weapon styles, each with its own skill tree and combat rhythm, allowing builds that lean toward defense, speed, or aggressive offense. Missions follow a familiar structure with tough enemies, limited healing, and Blade Nexus checkpoints, leading to major boss battles that act as serious roadblocks. These fights can take hours to overcome, but studying their patterns, learning precise dodges and guards, and slowly improving gear and abilities makes every victory feel extremely satisfying. The challenge is harsh but rewarding, and that strong boss design is why it earns a place in the excellent tier. Ghost of Yotei follows Atsu on a fierce path of revenge across the striking landscapes of Ezo, blending cinematic samurai style with fluid open-world combat. Atsu is a far more fiery and stubborn lead, giving the story a stronger emotional edge as she hunts the outlaw group responsible for her family's death. Combat is the highlight, built around multiple weapon types like the katana, spear, kusarigama, dual blades, and heavy odachi, each suited for different enemies and situations. Gunpowder weapons such as muskets and pistols add another layer, while tools like smoke bombs and flame buffs expand tactical options. Duels, standoffs, and large battles create intense moments where mastering parries, dodges, and weapon switching feels incredibly satisfying. The world offers side stories, shrines, and challenges that reward exploration. With its polished combat and strong atmosphere, it lands in the excellent tier. Mafia: The Old Country takes the series back to the early 1900s in Sicily, telling the story of Enzo Favara as he rises through the ranks of a crime family after escaping a brutal life in sulfur mines. The game returns to the series' classic linear structure, focusing on a tightly paced narrative rather than a sprawling open-world checklist. The story follows familiar mob drama themes, but strong writing and voice performances, especially from Don Torrisi, help give the characters weight. Gameplay sticks to traditional third-person cover shooting with a mix of stealth, distractions, and knife takedowns, while certain encounters introduce one-on-one knife duels that act like boss fights. Missions also feature horseback travel and early automobiles, adding a Western-like atmosphere to the Sicilian countryside. The mechanics stay fairly conventional, yet the setting, presentation, and storytelling carry the experience, placing it in the good tier. Indiana Jones and the Great Circle captures the spirit of the classic films with a globe-trotting adventure full of ancient mysteries, Nazi conspiracies, and cinematic spectacle. Set in 1937 between the events of Raiders of the Lost Ark and The Last Crusade, the story follows Indy on a hunt for a powerful artifact tied to the mysterious Great Circle. The first-person perspective strengthens immersion while exploring places like Vatican City, Egyptian ruins, and jungle temples, making puzzles and environmental interaction feel personal and tactile. Combat leans heavily on fistfights, whip tricks, and improvised weapons, rather than constant gunplay, which fits Indy's adventurous style. Stealth mechanics are fairly simple and occasionally show their limits, yet exploration, puzzles, and richly detailed environments keep the journey engaging. With strong performances, especially Troy Baker's convincing Indy and a story that feels true to the films, it earns a place in the excellent tier. Death Stranding Director's Cut presents the most feature-rich version of Hideo Kojima's unusual delivery adventure, refining the original experience with new tools, activities, and technical upgrades. Players once again guide Sam Porter Bridges across a haunting post-apocalyptic America, carefully transporting cargo through dangerous terrain while reconnecting isolated settlements. The director's cut adds features like a firing range for combat practice. The core gameplay loop still revolves around thoughtful route planning, balance management, and slow, deliberate travel across beautiful landscapes. Combined with its strange yet fascinating story and unique design philosophy, the experience earns its place in the masterpiece tier. Demon's Souls on PlayStation 5 brings the original 2009 classic back with stunning visuals and refined mechanics while staying true to the demanding design that started the Souls genre. The adventure takes place across 5 distinct worlds in the Kingdom of Boletaria, each built around unique dangers, enemy behaviors, and environmental challenges that test patience and strategy rather than simple reflexes. Combat remains methodical, where every attack, block, or dodge must be carefully considered due to stamina management and heavy consequences for mistakes. The remake improves controls, adds numerous quality-of-life features, and dramatically reduces load times, making repeated attempts after defeat far less frustrating. Memorable boss encounters and deep character build options give each playthrough a different feel. With its breathtaking presentation and carefully preserved challenge, it belongs in the masterpiece tier. Cyberpunk 2077 is one of those RPGs where the world itself keeps pulling me back in. Night City feels huge, dense, and alive, and I constantly find new stories just by taking on side jobs. I play as V, a mercenary who ends up sharing their mind with Johnny Silverhand, and their strange partnership drives the story forward. What I like most is the freedom. I can sneak through missions, hack enemies from a distance, or rush in with guns and cybernetic blades. My choices and quests often change how situations play out later, which makes the journey feel personal. The main story is shorter than I expected, but the side missions add a lot of depth and memorable moments. Even though bugs sometimes break the immersion, the world, characters, and player freedom place it in the masterpiece tier. Assassin's Creed Valhalla lets me live out a Viking adventure across a massive version of Dark Ages England. I play as Ivor, leading a clan, building alliances, and expanding a growing settlement while navigating the messy politics of the time. The world is huge and beautiful, with snowy Norway and rolling English hills that make exploration constantly rewarding. Raiding monasteries with my crew and storming castles creates some exciting moments, even if the structure of those battles starts to feel familiar after a while. Combat becomes more enjoyable once I unlock better abilities and weapons, though the progression system feels a bit confusing early on. There are also quite a few bugs that can interrupt the experience. Even so, the scale of the world, the Viking theme, and the amount of things to discover make it land in the good tier. Shadow of the Tomb Raider feels like a strong finale to Lara Croft's modern trilogy. I follow Lara through dense jungles and ancient ruins in South America as she tries to stop an approaching apocalypse while also dealing with the consequences of her own obsession. What stands out to me most are the tombs and puzzles, which are bigger, more creative, and often genuinely challenging. Exploring dark caves and massive temples gives a strong sense of mystery and danger. The world is larger than before, with hub areas full of people and stories, though many side activities feel less meaningful than the tombs themselves. Combat exists, but the game clearly prefers stealth and careful planning. Even if some exploration rewards feel less important, the atmosphere, puzzles, and emotional ending make it a great tier adventure. Uncharted Legacy of Thieves Collection gives me 2 fantastic adventures in one package, combining Nathan Drake's final journey with Chloe Fraser's standalone story. What I love most is how cinematic everything feels. The set pieces are huge, the environments are beautiful, and the characters carry the story with great performances and humor. Exploring jungles, ancient ruins, and hidden cities constantly feels exciting, and the mix of climbing, puzzle solving, stealth, and action keeps things moving at a great pace. This collection easily belongs in the masterpiece tier. The Last of Us Part 2 Remastered brings me back to one of the most intense and emotional stories I've played. The journey follows Ellie and Abby through a brutal world filled with revenge, loss, and difficult choices that constantly challenge how I feel about the characters. What stands out most is how powerful the storytelling is, supported by incredible performances and a world that feels painfully real. The remastered version also improves visuals, lighting, and loading times, making every location look even more detailed and immersive. Combat is tense and strategic, pushing me to think carefully about every encounter. The new no-return roguelike mode adds a fresh way to experience the gameplay with different characters and challenges. With its unforgettable story and polished improvements, it clearly belongs in the masterpiece tier. So, these are the PS5 games that stood out the most to me across different tiers, based on how much they delivered in gameplay, storytelling, and overall experience. But lists like this are always personal, so I'd like to know which PS5 games you would place in your own top tiers. Thanks for watching.